Today we'll look at how to grow some vegetables in your house. In this video presentation, I'll be presenting on growing the vegetables, the nutrient requirements, and some common pests that are found. The first thing we'll look at is how to grow the vegetable. So in this section, I'll be describing how to grow the vegetables from seeds. Okay, for other plants, you can think about cuttings, marcotings, or graftings, but this will not be covered in detail in this preliminary video because these are slightly more advanced techniques. So when we're thinking about growing plants, there are actually three parts of growing the plant. The first is the germination of the plant from the seed. The next is the vegetative growth, where it grows all the leaves and shoots. And the third is the reproductive growth for plants that have flowers and seeds. For the germination, now important thing is that at different stages, the plant needs different things. For example, at germination, one of the most important things is the amount of water, right? Then of course, it requires some nutrients like phosphorus and all that, which are more important at the start. And because these are important for the plant root growth and things like that. Okay, to understand more about how to grow the plants, let me just show you how to make a nursery to grow the plant seeds. Okay, so the first thing is we need to prepare the container. So this is actually the container that I am using, which is consists of one disposable container, which I got it from ordering some of the takeaways during the long break. Okay, and I put a spacer in between to separate that container into 6 different parts. So it's important that we separate the seeds into individual parts. Why? Because otherwise the roots will be entangled and it's very hard to transplant them. Okay, so after this is done, we'll put in the soil. So at this point of time, you want to put the soil. You also want to make sure this soil is completely drenched with water. You can actually start pouring the water until the whole bottom part is totally wet. So one important thing is how many seeds are going to put in each section. It's important to remember that not all the seeds will germinate. Generally, if you just open a pack, majority, about maybe more than half, about maybe 3/4 will germinate. But if you have kept the pack for quite some time, maybe even less than half will germinate. So in this case, you can use more than one seed. You can put 2 or 3 seeds or 4 seeds if you like. The only important thing to note is that at the end of the day, each of this section can only support one plant. So if you put and more growth, then you need to cut off the remainder. So after the seeds is put in, you put some more soil on top, and then you spray it as well to keep it damp. So let's just go through what we need to do. So you get a container, then you fill it up with the soil. Then you pour in enough water to cover the soil, and then you put the seeds on top of the wet soil. Now next comes the important part. You cover the seeds then with generally only half a centimeter of soil or 5 millimeters. In this case, you want to use a compost for this layer. The reason is that if you use a lot of sand, or even worse, if you use clay, it's actually very heavy. It may prevent the young seedlings, which are very weak, from pushing through to the top. However, in the case when you're growing things like beans, maybe soya beans, or in the case of green beans, you generally need to use at least 1 centimeter of soil, because why? In this case, they're quite big, the seeds. So they will push very strongly, and if it's not deep enough, the whole thing will just come out with the roots on the top. After that, when you have covered the soil, which is mainly compost, you then lightly water it. And you can then put it in a warm area for it to grow. Generally, it takes about 1 week to 2 weeks for the germination to occur, depending on which type of vegetable you're using. So this one is suitable for most vegetables, but you cannot use this method for things like carrots, or beet, or radish. Okay, it's not very suitable for those where you want the roots, because when you do the transplanting, you may actually damage some of the roots. In the case of carrots, beets, and radish, that's the part you want. So for carrots, beets, or radish, you want to grow it straight into the soil where you intend it to grow. You generally need, in this case, a soil of a depth of maybe 12 inches. Okay, but for most other vegetables, we do not, so we use this method. So after this is done, we need to transfer the baby plants. You should allow the plants to grow to approximately 4 centimeters. And it's very important that we look out for the first set of true leaf. Let's look at the plants I put in this picture. Okay, these are the true leaf. They are different from the, when the plant first grows, it will have 2 of the initial leaf. So this one is not the real leaf. Okay, so this, you need to wait for the real leaf, which will have the actual shape of the final vegetable. Okay, so the true leaf looks like that. They have the actual shape of the vegetable. In this case, it's a pak choy. In other case, like if you're going spinach, then it may look something more sharp like that, right? But generally, these are different than the first set, which generally has a flower shape. So when transplanting, you want to get a pot of maybe about 10 to 15 centimeters. Okay, then after that, if you're going in your garden, of course, you put them about 20 to 30 centimeters apart. So you approximately fill 3 centimeters or 1 inch of soil, and then you dig out the whole plug. So you put the plug on top of this 1 inch. Okay, so on top of your plug, you have your leaves growing. Okay, then after that, you top up with soil. You generally want to top up with soil so it covers the bottom part. Okay, which is about 1 cm above the bark. Then after, you can put it in a sunny position and water daily. Or sometimes you can even water them once in 2 days, depending on what pot you use. The smaller the pot you use, generally you need to water more often because the amount of moisture that can be retained is a lot less. It's also depending on the type of soil you use. If you use a compost type of soil, of course, it can absorb more. If you use a sandy soil, it can absorb a lot less water. So next, let's talk about reproductive growth. So the plant will soon start to have leaves, and then it can progress to flowers if kept for a long time. Now for vegetables, we don't want to keep it till it has flowers because then it'll be too hard. So we generally harvest it before it reach the flowering stage. In the case of basil, the moment it starts to have its flower, then the whole plant will die as well. So sometimes we want to eat the basil leaf, but if it reaches the flower, it will die. So what we do is that the moment we see the flowers in basil, we will pinch off all the flowers. Or we snip off all the top parts that have flowers so that it will prolong the vegetative growth so that you can continue to enjoy the basil from the same plant for quite a number of months in this case. The next important thing we need to know before we look at nutrition is how does the plant grow? So of course, the most common thing we know, it grows from the bottom, it goes all the way to the top, right? So the bottom are the old leaves, and the top is a young leaf. Okay, but what is not so common, at least when I first started, I didn't realize it, was that when you look at the leaf, so this is a stem, okay, it grows from the stem outwards, which means the tip of the leaf is actually the young. And the base of the leaf is a, sorry, I got this wrong. Sorry, the tip of the leaf is actually the old part, and the base of the leaf is the young part. Okay, which is, we always think, oh, the leaf blade, we always say, oh, the top part we believe to be young, but actually the top part is actually the old part, whereas the base of the leaf is the young part because it's starting to grow from here. Yep. Now, how does this affect? First, let's look at the nutrients that are common. So there are 3 main nutrients, which are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So in the general, fertilizer is written down as the NPK value. Sometimes they write it there, NPK, sometimes they don't. But all of them has this value. So 15, 15, 20 means 15% nitrogen, 15% phosphorus, and 20% potassium. Right, so this number is given like in here, it is slightly different, maybe 2903. Okay, on top of this, of course, there are some other nutrients which are major but not used to a large extent to the first three, which are your iron, manganese, and magnesium and calcium. And then you have a lot of other micronutrients as well. So let's look at some of the mobile nutrients. So what do you mean by mobile nutrients? When we say mobile nutrients, okay, so mobile means can move. So if they can move, they affect the whole. Okay, so because when the plant is experience short of the nutrients, it will absorb these nutrients from the old leaves and transform it to the younger part of the leaf. So nitrogen is one of the most important nutrients. It's important for the general growth, and it does affect the whole plant. But in general, you can see that the older leaves at the bottom more affected than the younger leaves at the top, which are less affected. Okay, so generally the plant will grow slower. You can also see the whole plant turning to a lighter green color. Next, we have potassium. So potassium is also very, very mobile. So when it's deficient, they will move out from the older parts and go to the younger parts. So important, remember we said the tip of the leaves are the old and the base is the young. So you absorb the potassium in that direction. So what you end up is the tip of the leaf actually burns or dies because there's not enough new potassium in this case. And this also occurs at the older leaves first, going towards the younger leaves. For phosphorus, what you'll notice is that it turns dark green, and in some cases you can have a purple. And of course, because this being a mobile nutrient, it also affects the older leaves before they affect the younger leaves. Phosphorus is very important for the young plants because they are responsible for root development. And then next one we come is magnesium. Okay, so in magnesium we can see interveinal chlorosis. So what does it mean? You can see the plant has got veins, right? You notice around the veins it's still green, but the area between the veins is now turning yellow. So that's how we can distinguish whether it's magnesium or not, and it starts with the older leaf. Okay, so all of this starts with the older leaves and then goes towards a younger leaf. So if it's uniformly light green, it's nitrogen. Okay, if you see the tip of the plant turning brown, of the leaves turning brown, we know it's potassium. Okay, for magnesium, we can see the interveinal chlorosis. And for phosphorus, of course, we can see generally, you can see some parts turning a bit purplish and a darker green type of color. Now let's go to the immobile nutrients. So the fact that they are immobile means that generally they will affect the younger leaves. Because when the nutrient is short, it cannot reabsorb from the older leaves. So the older leaves that already grow are okay, but the younger leaves tend to be not so okay because they don't have enough of the nutrients. The first one is calcium. So the way we look at calcium is always look at the shoot because you notice in this case, that one's not doing too well. So generally what you'll notice is that the buds itself start to die back. So the buds die first. Okay, then we know, okay, yeah, that's calcium. In iron, we see interveinal chlorosis. So this is similar to magnesium, except you notice in the case of iron, it appears at the younger leaf. The bottom leaves are okay, right? So that's how we distinguish between iron and the magnesium. So you still get the interveinal chlorosis, but more at the top, and this one you have a very, very distinct color gradient. Now, apart from talking about all these nutrients, one is how much you put in the soil. You can control that. The next thing we need to understand is that the pH of the soil does affect whether these nutrients can be absorbed or not. So the pH of the soil does actually affect to a large extent what nutrients are available to the plant. So in general, we would like to go somewhere between 6 to 7 or 5.5 to 7. So this is the range we like to go for vegetables, most of the vegetables. Okay, some others of course have different, but generally this is the range we're looking for, right? Then if you go lower, it's not good. Higher is also not good. So how does this affect us? This affects us when we are using soil that has been reused. So when you purchase one bag of soil and you use it, yeah, it works fine. Then the next time you grow, you say, oh no, why is it dying? Okay, because as a lot of our soil contains a lot of this dried plant material, compost. So when they get digested by the microbes in the soil, they do tend to make the soil slightly more on the acidic side. So it does tend to make it drift this way. Okay, so as we go more to the acidic side, we notice things like calcium getting less, okay, nitrogen getting less, but not as much as calcium and magnesium. Okay, so then what we'll notice is, okay, it's turning green, interveinal chlorosis, we'll start to see it, we'll start to see the buds starting to die, things like that. So there are many ways to correct this. The ones that we use in the industry is of course dolomite lime, but of course the application of dolomite lime is not as simple, because if you put too much, it gets very basic. So if it gets very basic, then you have other things like iron becoming less, right? So you need to understand it's not so easy to do this. The easiest way is, of course, to just throw away the soil and take a new soil. So just a summary, this gives you a summary of how each of them look. So all those that are very mobile, you can notice they are going to affect your bottom leaf. Then those that are less mobile, you notice they are going to affect your upper leaf. I did not cover some of the micronutrients because these are not so common to be deficient. So now let's talk about the fertilizers you can use. In general, the fertilizers you can use include slow release solid fertilizers. They can either be chemical based, which is shown here, or you could have some that are based on more natural, right? Like nowadays, people all go for this organic farming. So they use organic fertilizers, which are actually just the excrements of various animals, right? So what's the difference? Um, Organic fertilizers release very slowly, so you need to add slightly more. But because they release slowly, they do not harm the plant very much if you add too much. Whereas if you add in a chemical one, if you exceed the value, it can affect quite drastically. It can kill the plant straight away. Okay, so follow the instructions on the fertilizer packet, because each fertilizer packet has a particular composition and they will tell you how to apply it. On top of that, we can use fertilizers for liquid fertilizers in soil. Okay, they can either be in liquid form or they can be a solid form you dissolve in water and you pour it on the plant soil. These in general are a lot more fast acting. So they are suitable for people who are already comfortable with using them. But for those who are not comfortable, I would not recommend it because the application rate is more tricky. Okay, because if you put it makes the plant react faster, but it also will kill the plant if you put too much. Of course, if you're using a hydroponics, there are hydroponic fertilizers A and B. Okay, so that is a bit more tricky because you need to make sure that you need to dilute A and B one at a time into the large amount of water. So you dilute A first, then you mix it, then you put B. Okay, because A and B cannot be added together at the same time, because if A touches B in a concentrate form, they will interact with each other and makes it not as good. On top of that, there are foliar fertilizers. So this is written. Sometimes you see the word foliar. Okay, this the only time we use this is perhaps when you are growing things like orchids. So in the case of orchids, yes, I do use foliar fertilizers, but in most other cases, I do not. Okay, then of course I say control the pH. We can use dolomite lime, which contains magnesium and calcium carbonate. But this case must be very, very careful. Now let's look at some common pests that you will see in the house. We'll talk about the 4 most common ones that I've noticed in the gardens in Singapore, which are white flies, aphids, spider mites, and mealybugs. White flies. How do you know you have a white fly infestation? You can first see a lot of flies, very tiny little white things flying around all over the place. Okay, and then if you flip below the leaf, you should see the eggs and some of the white flies as well. Then you know you have a white fly infestation. Okay. Next, you have aphids. These are normally seen at the buds, okay, or very young shoots. You'll see them grouping together, okay, and then generally you also may attract some ants, or you'll see that if you touch the shoots, you can feel some sticky stuff. These are due to the excrements from the aphids. Generally, what they do, they pierce through the younger shoots and they suck out all the sap from the plant, which is the nutrients to them. Next, we have spider mites. What you notice is like you have this web. So you cover the whole plant. So it's very, very obvious. And if you look tiny closely, you can see the spider mites, but generally the first thing you notice is the web. And mealybugs. So they look like this cottony stuff that you see. Okay, generally they are the part in between the leaves and the shoots. At least that's the part I always notice they are. So how do we control that? Okay, so you can control by trapping the insect, or you can control by killing the insect. So for vegetables that you're going to consume, I suggest you just use a yellow sticky trap. Basically, it's just a yellow color board filled with some glue. So when the insects are attracted to it, they stick onto it and they can't get out and they die. Okay. Other methods people have used, they have used soap or neem oil, or some even use garlic if you're talking about aphids. Right, so all this will work for most of them, except spider mites. Spider mites are unfortunately very, very difficult. My opinion, cut it off and throw it away. Okay, I've handled this before and I found that the best method for spider mites is to use a sulfur soap with neem oil mixture. So generally I bought sulfur soap that you can buy in all those hardware shops. It's quite common for the laborers to have this sulfur soap. So it's in those type of areas. And then you take it and then you mix it with some neem oil into a large volume of water and then you spray it. I've achieved reasonable success using this method. Okay, and that brings us to the end of this presentation on growing the plants. If you have any question and answer, any questions that you need to do, you can put it up and I will answer it. In general, I think it's not too difficult to grow uh, vegetables in Singapore. You just need to have a moderate amount of light, generally somewhere near the window, that will suffice. Okay, I guess that's all. Thank you.